Something that happens very frequently with me is getting mad at things. And this happens because I simply see something, and my first instinct is anger, frustration, and maybe just reactionary in general. In fact, this has gotten me into a lot of altercations with other people many times, and while I could say that maybe it was justified, my frustrations and anger, I also think, had I not done that, this whole entire debacle and this whole entire thing would have just never existed. And in my mind, I wouldn't have had to deal with, the pain of every single time thinking of all these mistakes where I've gone into all these altercations. And at the end of the day, while I do come out with some sort of new perspective on my life and just in general on how I act towards other people, I've sort of, thought to myself, had I just not been so reactive, then I wouldn't have had this problem to begin with. So over time, when I see something and I sort of want to react, I sort of get reminded of these other times. And I'm like, I don't want to piss people off because while I do feel like to some extent I could say my opinions and I could be correct in this one instance, I then realize there's no point because by the time that I finish giving my opinion on that thing, I realize just how useless it was because just thinking about it, I was thinking about this one thing that I saw that kind of pissed me off, and I was like, this is exactly what I was saying about blah blah blah. And then I was like looking at the comments, and then I was looking at what other people were saying, and I'm like, these people think the same way as me. And then when I thought about it even more, I'm like, wait a second, why was I mad about this to begin with? And then I'm like, oh yeah, it's because I felt nobody else thought this way, but then I see a lot of people think this way, and then I see other people that don't think this way, and I'm like, oh, even if they don't think in this exact same way that I do, I realize that there's no point in getting mad about my perspective being unseen, when in reality, it was pretty popular, and I just kind of assumed that it was not popular. And because of that, I sort of got angry that nobody else was speaking on it. But then as soon as I saw the other people speaking on it, I started to get annoyed, and I realized there was really no reason to even get mad in the first place. And the whole thing that I got mad at was just trying to get a rise out of me, even a little bit, at least in the way that it was worded. How I at least perceived it, I felt like it was specifically made and written to be somewhat confrontational, or even somewhat to get a reaction out of people, right? And now that I think about it, I'm like, then why the fuck did why did I let this one thing control me for a good 10 minutes if at the end of it I was just like, you know what, fuck this shit, I don't care. And then I was like, now back to normal, and I'm just thinking back, and I'm like, that was so pointless. So again, getting mad is not necessarily the worst thing ever, but a lot of the times I just end up coming to this conclusion where it's like pointless, because why was I even mad at this if other people do think the same way? And when I really think about it, it's just adding more negativity to something that really isn't that big of a deal. So now, because I got mad at it at first because, I thought nobody was going to talk about this. Oh, obviously, they're making a bigger deal out of this. And then it's like, oh, wait a second, they are making a bigger deal out of this. Why the fuck did I, I became self-conscious of that fact. It's like, oh shit. I literally, I didn't need to get mad at this. I just needed to scroll away and just completely ignore it and move on with my day, But instead, I decided to think about it for more seconds, and I'm like, yeah, why the fuck are people making a bigger deal out of this? And then it's like, oh yeah, people weren't making a bigger deal out of this. It's just a nothing sandwich, and this whole thing was just meant to sort of trigger me, and I guess I sort of fed into it because I wanted to get mad at something. I wanted to be mad for some reason, I guess. I just wanted an excuse, and that was my avenue to get mad at something. And then I realized, yeah, it was pointless. And so now I'm just like, well, I gotta talk about it because it happens to me a lot of times. I have to mention it at some point. And I think a lot of people also go through their lives and they have these moments where they have a lapse in judgment or a sudden urge to do something, and you feel like you're correct for stepping away and not even doing anything. And I think that's actually the best way to do it, is just thinking you're right whenever you disengage, because in my opinion a lot of these things are not really worth pursuing. They're not really worth wasting hours just picking your brain at how somebody could think this way, and instead you're just sort of like, well, maybe somebody does think this way, but it doesn't really affect me personally, so I don't really have to worry about that. And so there you go. That's problem solved. There you go. Now you don't have to fucking worry about this other person's opinion, because well, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. I mean, it's their opinion. You should respect that, but also, like, if you don't agree with it, you just don't agree with it, and that's it. You don't have to make a bigger deal out of this. You don't have to virtue signal or, pretend like you had a point to make in the first place. And well, yeah, you end up like this in a state of remorse, and now you feel a little bit calm. You're like, oh, well, I can move on. I guess there was no outrage to begin with, and maybe when something does happen, I can actually use my anger for real that time. When something that it actually is terrible happens, then yeah, now I can actually be, giving my opinion and put in as much passion as I need to. And if that passion requires me getting angry, then now I've wasted it on something that is actually worth my time, as opposed to this random thing that was probably going to be forgotten about in like a couple of days or so, and nobody's going to really care, to be honest. So yeah, that's just how things go sometimes. So anyways, that's all for this. Yeah, goodbye.